He was the perfect man, a billionaire heir. She was the woman from the wrong side of the tracks, living a real-life fairy tale. But as they stood at the altar, the doors of the cathedral burst open. A bleeding woman stumbled down the aisle, her hand outstretched, screaming a name no one recognized. In seconds, the wedding floor was stained crimson, and the groom turned ghost white. Because this wasn't just an interruption. It was an execution. And the priest holding a sealed DNA file was about to become the star witness in a crime 25 years in the making. The scent of 1,000 white lilies hung heavy in the air of the St. Jude Cathedral, so thick it was almost suffocating. For Alice Hayes, it was the smell of a life she couldn't believe was hers. She stood at the marble altar, her hand resting lightly on the arm of Liam Ashford, the man who was in approximately 10 minutes to be her husband. She could feel the weight of his family's gaze from the front pew. The Ashfords. Their name was etched into the very foundation of the city, displayed on hospital wings and university libraries. They were old money, a concept so foreign to Alice, who had grown up sharing a room with her 2 sisters in a tiny apartment above a failing bakery. And then there was Liam. He was everything a billion-dollar heir was supposed to be, devastatingly handsome, impossibly charming, with a disarming smile that had from their first meeting felt like coming home. He'd seen her not her threadbare clothes or her second-hand car. He'd seen her ambition, her kindness, her art. But even now, standing in a couture gown that cost more than her family's yearly income, she felt like an imposter. A well-dressed thief in a castle. "You're trembling." Liam murmured, his voice low and intimate, meant only for her. He squeezed her hand. "Second thoughts, my love?" She forced a bright smile. "Just cold feet. Or maybe it's this dress. It weighs a ton." He chuckled a perfect, easy sound. But as he turned his gaze back to the priest, Father Michael Alice caught a flicker of something in his eyes. A tension in his jaw that the smile didn't quite reach. She'd seen it before in fleeting moments. When he spoke to his father, Marcus Ashford. When he thought no one was watching. It was a flash of fear. "No," she told herself sternly. "Stop it. You're sabotaging yourself. This is real. He loves you." Father Michael. A kind man with weary eyes who had counseled them for weeks cleared his throat. He seemed unusually somber today, his usual warmth replaced by a palpable gravity. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice echoing in the vaulted ceilings. "We are gathered here today in the sight of God to join this man, Liam Alastair Ashford, and this woman, Alice Renee Hayes, in holy matrimony." Alice focused on Liam's face, trying to ground herself. His silver blue eyes. The small scar just above his left eyebrow he claimed he got falling out of a tree. She catalogued his features, memorizing the man she was about to give her life to. From the front row, Marcus Ashford watched them, his face an unreadable mask. He was a formidable man, with a presence that sucked the air out of a room. He had not, Alice knew, approved of this match. He'd made his displeasure known through polite, cutting remarks, and a prenuptial agreement so brutal it had made their lawyer wince. It was Liam who had fought him. Liam who had insisted. "It's you I want, Alice. The money means nothing." Father Michael continued. "Marriage is a sacred covenant, one not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, discreetly, advisably, and soberly." Alice's own small contingent of guests, her parents, her sisters, and her best friend Chloe, looked hopelessly out of place, a small raft of beige wool in a sea of silks and custom suits. Her mother was crying, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "If anyone here knows any just cause," Father Michael's voice boomed, Why this man and this woman should not be lawfully joined together, let them speak now, or else hereafter forever hold their peace. A standard line. A formality. The cathedral held its collective breath, a perfect, practiced silence. And then it shattered. Boom! Crash! The great oak doors at the back of the cathedral burst open, slamming against the stone walls. The organist, startled, hit a dissonant, screeching chord. Every head in the church spun around. A woman stood silhouetted in the doorway. She was soaked as if she'd run through a rainstorm, though the day was bright and clear. Her hair was matted, her clothes were torn. She looked, Alice thought, with a guilty pang, like one of the homeless women who sometimes slept on the church steps. "Where is she?" the woman shrieked, her voice raw. "Where is my daughter?" Two security guards in black suits. Mr. Evans and Mr. Davies. Marcus Ashford's personal detail moved immediately from their posts at the aisle. "Ma'am, you can't be in here. This is a private event." The woman staggered forward into the light, and Alice's heart stopped. The woman's face was bruised. There was a long, fresh cut, weeping blood from her hairline. But it wasn't the injuries that held Alice captive. It was her eyes. Desperate, frantic, and an identical shade of hazel to the ones Alice saw in her own mirror every morning. The woman locked eyes with Alice at the altar. A terrible, guttural sound tore from her throat. "Alice, no, that's not your name," she screamed, stumbling down the aisle, pushing past horrified guests. "Sophia, my Sophia, you can't marry him, you can't." The name echoed in the silence. Sophia. It struck Alice like a physical blow. A memory thin as cobweb flashed behind her eyes, a dark room, the smell of lavender and antiseptic, and a voice singing a lullaby. "Sogna mia Sophia sogna. Dream, my Sophia, dream." She swayed on her feet. Liam's hand tightened on hers, his grip suddenly like a steel trap. "Liam," she whispered, turning to him. But Liam wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on the approaching woman, his face drained of all color. He wasn't just surprised. He was terrified. "Get her out of here!" Marcus Ashford roared, rising from his seat. "Evans, Davies, do your job now!" The two guards, galvanized by their employer's fury, grabbed the woman by her arms. She fought them with a desperate, wiry strength. "No, please," she cried. Her gaze still locked on Alice. "You have to listen to me. They're monsters. He's one of them. Who?" Alice found her voice, stepping forward past the altar flowers. "Who are you?" Father Michael held up a hand. "Gentlemen, please, let us not use violence in the house of God." "She's trespassing, Father," Marcus said, his voice cold as ice. "She's clearly unwell. Have her removed." The woman Isabella wrestled one arm free and pointed a trembling, dirt-caked finger. Not at Alice, not at Marcus, but at Liam. "Him!" she shrieked. "He's not who he says he is. He's a lie. They're all lies. Ask him. Ask him about the fire. Ask him about the clinic." The word fire hit Liam like a bullet. He physically recoiled, letting go of Alice's hand as if he'd been burned. Alice saw it. The entire church saw it. The confident, charming groom was gone, replaced by a pale, trembling stranger. "Liam, what is she talking about?" Alice's voice was sharp, cutting through the murmurs. "What fire?" Liam shook his head, his eyes wide, pupils dilated. I don't know. She's insane. Alice, baby, she's just some crazy person." But his voice was hollow. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "I have proof." Isabella screamed, clawing at the pocket of her ruined jacket. I tried to warn you, I sent it to the priest." All eyes, including Alice's, snapped to Father Michael. The priest's face was ashen. He clutched the heavy Bible in his hands, his knuckles white. "Father," Alice whispered, "what is she talking about?" Before he could answer Mr. Evans, the larger of the two guards decided to end the scene. He was a man loyal only to the Ashford paycheck. With a grunt of effort, he shoved the woman. Hard. It wasn't just a push to get her out. It was a violent, calculated shove. Isabella, already unbalanced, stumbled backward. Her heel caught on the edge of the plush white runner Alice had walked down only moments before. She fell sideways, her arms windmilling. Time slowed. Alice saw it happen as if through water. The woman's fall. The edge of the raised marble step of the altar. The sickening wet crack as her head connected with the stone. She didn't move. A collective gasp sucked the air from the cathedral. And then the blood. It didn't seep. It gushed. A dark, horrific crimson, pooling rapidly, staining the white runner, snaking its way toward the hem of Alice's wedding dress. "Mother?" The word slipped from Alice's lips. A breath, a prayer, a question. She didn't know why she'd said it. She ripped the veil from her head and scrambled forward, her $5,000 dress dragging through the spreading pool of blood. "No, oh God, no, somebody help her!" Alice dropped to her knees beside the unmoving woman, her hands hovering, terrified to touch her. "Somebody call 911. The cathedral erupted into chaos. People were standing, shouting. Alice's mother let out a terrified wail. Marcus Ashford was already on his phone, not to 911, but to his lawyer. "We have a situation, a trespasser, an accident." Liam, the groom, stood frozen. He was staring at the blood, his face a mask of abject horror. He looked like a man watching his own execution. He was paler than the lilies, paler than Alice's dress. He turned his terrified gaze from the bleeding woman to the one man who hadn't moved. Father Michael. "Stop." The priest's voice was no longer kind or weary. It was a thunderous command that silenced the panic. "Everyone, stop, now." He stepped down from the pulpit, his dark robes sweeping the floor. He didn't go to Isabella. He didn't go to Alice. He walked directly to the front pew, retrieved a thick, worn leather briefcase from under his seat, and placed it on the altar. He clicked it open. "Mr. Ashford." Father Michael said, his voice shaking with a righteous fury Alice had never heard. He was looking at Liam. "She is right. I have been investigating her claims for 3 weeks. I prayed it was the fantasy of a disturbed mind." He reached into the briefcase and pulled out a thick, sealed manila envelope. "But it is not," he said. He held it up for the church to see. Written on the front in black marker were 2 words: DNA file. The sight of the envelope held aloft by the priest hung in the air like a death sentence. The sirens in the distance grew louder, a soundtrack to the unraveling of a dynasty. Alice was frozen. Her knees were soaked in the woman's blood. This woman, Isabella, Sophia. The pieces were jagged, sharp, and they didn't fit. She looked from the bleeding woman to the pale groom to the furious priest. "Father, what is that?" Alice demanded, her voice trembling. "What is going on?" Liam finally moved. He took a step toward the priest, his hands held up, palms out. "Father, please, this is not the time or the place. There's a woman. She's hurt. We need to—" "The time is now, Liam," Father Michael snapped. "And the place is here, in the house of God, where you were about to take sacred vows built on a foundation of unholy lies." "How dare you?" Marcus Ashford bellowed, striding toward the altar. "You will be defrocked for this. This is a slanderous circus, Evans Davies. Take that file from him." The 2 guards, their faces grim, moved toward the priest. "Touch me," Father Michael warned, his voice low and dangerous. And you will be adding assaulting a priest to the list of crimes committed here today. This file is not church property. It is evidence. I am holding it for the police who are now arriving." As if on cue, 2 uniformed officers burst through the main doors, their expressions hardening, as they took in the scene, the opulent wedding, the panicked guests, and the bride kneeling in a pool of blood next to an unconscious woman. "What in God's name happened here?" The senior officer. A man named Sergeant Miller asked, his hand on his sidearm. "She fell, officer," Marcus said smoothly, taking charge. "A tragic accident. This person, this trespasser ran in, caused a disturbance, and she tripped. My security was merely trying to escort her out." Mr. Evans nodded quickly. "That's right. She was hysterical. Tripped over her own feet." "He pushed her!" Alice shrieked, pointing a blood-covered finger at Evans. You pushed her! I saw you!" Sergeant Miller's eyes narrowed. "Paramedics are right behind me. Ma'am," he said to Alice, "step away from her." As paramedics rushed in with a gurney and trauma kit, Father Michael stepped forward, holding the envelope. "Officer," he said, "my name is Father Michael. I am the rector of this parish. You are not here because of an accident. You are here because of a crime. Several, in fact. This woman—" He pointed to Isabella, who was now being carefully strapped onto a backboard. "Is Isabella Rossi. She was attacked because she was trying to stop this wedding." "On what grounds?" Miller asked, pulling out a notepad. "On the grounds," Father Michael said, his voice ringing with conviction, "that the groom, Liam Alastair Ashford, does not exist." A collective horrified gasp filled the cathedral. Alice felt the floor tilt beneath her. What do you mean he doesn't exist?" she whispered. Liam was shaking his head, a frantic, jerky motion. "He's insane! The priest is insane! Alice, look at me! It's me! It's Liam! This is a nightmare! A corporate sabotage! Someone is trying to ruin us!" "Then you won't mind this," Father Michael said. He ripped the seal on the manila envelope. This was the moment from the title. The groom turned pale. But pale was an understatement. Liam Ashford looked like a man who had seen his own grave. His lips were blue. His body was rigid with a terror so profound it made Alice sick to her stomach. He wasn't acting. This wasn't a surprise. This was exposure. "This envelope," the priest announced, "was sent to me 3 weeks ago by Ms. Rossi. It contains her life's work. She has been searching for 2 people for over 20 years. The first was her daughter." And he pulled out a laminated, folded piece of paper, a birth certificate. "A birth certificate," he read, "for one Sophia Rossi, born 28 years ago to Isabella Rossi, put into a closed adoption system after Ms. Rossi, homeless and suffering from severe postpartum depression, was deemed an unfit mother." He looked directly at Alice. A system that placed her with a loving couple, Alan and Mary Hayes. Alice's world dissolved. She looked at her parents in the second row. Her mother was sobbing uncontrollably into her father's chest. They knew. All this time, they knew. You're my... Alice looked at the gurney being wheeled out. The woman with the bleeding head was her mother. The words she had whispered made sense. Her soul had recognized its own. "But that," Father Michael said, "is not the secret Ms. Rossi died to protect." "She's not dead," Alice cried. "She was trying to protect you, Sophia, or Alice, from him." He pointed again at Liam, because the second person she was searching for was the real Liam Ashford. He pulled out a second set of documents. "These," he said, "are medical records, and a newspaper clipping yellowed with age from 25 years ago. Tragic fire at Ashford Estate. Infant son Liam, miraculously unharmed." "See?" Marcus Ashford spat. My son is my son. This is preposterous. But he wasn't unharmed. Was he, Mr. Ashford? Father Michael's voice was soft, but it cut through the room. This is a sworn affidavit, a deathbed confession from a nurse named Catherine Rossi, Isabella's sister. The priest's hands were shaking now. Nurse Rossi worked at a private, discreet clinic, one that you, Mr. Ashford, funded. She attests that the real Liam Ashford, a sickly child, did not survive that fire. He died of smoke inhalation that night. Lies, all lies, Marcus roared. And finally, the priest said, pulling out the last crisp lab-certified document. The DNA file. Isabella, knowing her sister's story, spent her life savings to get a sample of Liam's DNA from a discarded coffee cup. She had it tested against a public database. He turned to the groom. The man standing before you, Father Michael declared, shares no genetic markers with Marcus Ashford. He is not an Ashford. His DNA is a near-perfect match for an orphan from the St. Gabriel's home, a boy named Jack Sullivan. The name Jack Sullivan hung in the consecrated air, heavier and more final than any death knell. Liam or Jack staggered, collapsing against the altar. He wasn't a groom. He was a cornered animal. All the charm, the easy confidence, the old money grace. It evaporated, revealing the terrified, hollow man beneath. Jack. Alice breathed his name. It felt alien on her tongue. He called you Jack. He looked up at her, and for the first time, Alice saw him. Not the billionaire prince, but a complete and total stranger. His eyes, the silver blue eyes she'd loved, were now just the eyes of a liar. Alice, please, he choked out. I can explain. It's complicated. Complicated? Sergeant Miller stepped forward, his tone all business. It sounds like felony fraud, son, at the minimum. He's not my son, Marcus Ashford barked, realizing the game was over. The performance of the loving father vanished, replaced by pure reptilian calculation. This man is a con artist. He has been deceiving my family for years. Jack's head snapped up. His look of terror was instantly replaced by a flash of pure, unadulterated hatred. What? He whispered, his voice cracking. I deceived you, you monster. He pushed himself off the altar and pointed a shaking finger at the man who had called him son for 2 decades. He's lying, Jack screamed at the police. He's the devil, he's the one, he engineered all of it. Alice backed away step by step until she hit the choir stalls. Her bloody hands left crimson prints on the polished wood. This was a nightmare. The woman who was her mother was in an ambulance, and the man she was about to marry was... Who? Explain. Now, Sergeant Miller commanded, motioning for his partner to cover Marcus. And so the confession began. Jack Sullivan, the man who called himself Liam Ashford, broke down. The weight of 25 years of deception crushed him in an instant. I was 8 years old. Jack wept, sinking to his knees on the bloody floor. I was at St. Gabriel's. I had no one. Then he spat the word at Marcus, came to the orphanage. He didn't come to adopt. He came to shop. He described it, how Marcus Ashford had lined up 3 different boys all around the same age with light hair and blue eyes. How he'd been examined like livestock. How he'd been chosen. The real Liam died in that fire, Jack said, his voice hollow. The Ashford Trust, the entire family fortune, it was contingent on a direct male heir. If the line was broken upon Marcus's death, everything, billions, would revert to a foundation. He couldn't let that happen. So Marcus Ashford hadn't just found an orphan. He'd created a replacement. He took me from the orphanage. He told them I was going to a special school. He faked my death a year later in a boating accident. My entire life was erased, and a new one began. Jack described a childhood that was not privileged, but brutal. It wasn't love, it was training. Every day, he said, his voice thick with trauma, I was drilled. How the real Liam laughed, what his favorite food was. I had to study photos, home movies, when I messed up when I used the wrong fork, or when I called him sir instead of father. He would lock me in the old wine cellar. For days, he beat me. He told me if I ever told anyone he would kill me, and that no one would ever even know I was gone. He said, "You are Liam Ashford. Jack Sullivan is dead." Alice felt sick, the scar above his eye. "The tree," she whispered. Jack looked at her, his eyes dead. He hit me with the bronze head of a fireplace poker, because I forgot the name of his mother's show dog. I was 9. The church was utterly silent, save for Jack's ragged breathing. "And the nurse," Father Michael prompted gently. "Nurse Catherine." "Isabella's sister," Jack said. "She was the one. She worked at the private clinic where Marcus took me, to fix me. Plastic surgery. He had my earlobes changed. A small scar on my chin recreated to match the real Liam. Nurse Catherine, she knew. She was the only one who was ever kind to me. She used to sneak me candy. She figured it out. She confronted him. He threatened her. He told her he'd ruin her family, have her medical license revoked. He paid her off. But she must have kept records." "She gave them to her sister," Father Michael affirmed, "on her deathbed just last year. And Isabella, who had been searching for her lost daughter Sophia for decades, suddenly had a new target. The Ashfords." Alice finally understood. Isabella hadn't just found her daughter. She had found her daughter about to marry into the very family that had destroyed her sister's life and soul. The attack today, it wasn't random. She was trying to warn me," Alice said. "When she burst in, her face was already bruised. Someone tried to stop her before she got here." Her eyes and the eyes of every police officer snapped to Marcus Ashford. Marcus remained impossibly calm. "A compelling story. The delusions of a failed actor. Officer, I am the victim here. This man has confessed to grand larceny and fraud." "And you," Sergeant Miller said, "are a person of interest in an assault and a potential conspiracy to commit fraud going back 25 years. And Mr. Evans," he said, nodding to the guard, "you're under arrest for assault and battery. I saw you push that woman on my way in. You're coming with us." As handcuffs clicked onto Mr. Evans, Jack Sullivan, the imposter groom, looked at Alice. His face was a ruin of despair. "Alice, I really did love you. You were the only real thing in my entire life. When I met you, you were so genuine. You weren't like them. I thought with you I could finally be me." "Who are you?" she asked, her voice flat, devoid of all the love she'd felt an hour ago. I don't know," he whispered. "No." Alice said, her voice hardening, the shock giving way to a cold, clear rage. "I know exactly who you are. You're a coward. You're a liar. You saw my mother bleeding out on the floor, and you stood there and said nothing to save yourself. You let her get hurt to protect this lie." She turned away from him. She faced the altar, the priest, the police. "He's right." Alice said, her voice clear and strong. "His father, or whatever he is a monster, but he is a willing participant. He could have told me. He could have walked away. But he was standing here about to marry me, to pull me into his web. He's just as guilty as Marcus." Jack flinched, as if she had slapped him. "Take them away," Alice said to the police. Take them all away." The arrest of Marcus Ashford, one of the city's most powerful men, and his son, Jack Sullivan, on the altar of St. Jude Cathedral, was not a quiet affair. The guests who had been held by the police as witnesses were now a buzzing hive of whispers and flashing cell phones. The Ashford dynasty, a pillar of society, was crumbling in real time. As Sergeant Miller read Marcus his rights, the patriarch's mask of arrogant calm finally fractured. His face turned a deep, blotchy purple. "You are making a catastrophic mistake," he seethed at the officer. "My lawyers will have your badge for this. This is the word of a deranged woman and a confessed con man. You have nothing on me." "We have the sworn affidavit of Nurse Catherine Rossi," Father Michael interjected, handing the entire file to Miller. "We have the DNA report. And we have a new witness." He nodded toward Alice, "who saw your employee Mr. Evans assault Isabella Rossi before she fell. An assault I'd wager you ordered." Marcus's eyes darted to his remaining guard, Mr. Davies, as if ordering him to intervene. But Davies, seeing his partner in cuffs and his boss's empire collapsing slowly, raised his hands. "I'm just security. I didn't see anything. I'm cooperating." "Traitor!" Marcus spat. The police led Marcus Ashford and Jack Sullivan down the main aisle, the same aisle Alice had walked dreaming of her future. The guests parted for them, a sea of horrified, fascinated faces. Jack the imposter walked with his head down, shoulders slumped, a broken man. Marcus, however, walked with his head high, his eyes burning with a promise of retribution. As he passed the pew where Alice's parents sat huddled, he paused. He looked at Mary and Alan Hayes. "You," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "You knew! You knew she was that woman's child!" Alice's head whipped around. "What?" Her father. Alan, a man who had never raised his voice in his life, stood up, his face pale. We were told the mother was unstable, that she'd abandoned her. The adoption was sealed to protect Alice." "But you knew her name was Sophia." Alice whispered the betrayal, a fresh, cold wound. "All these years, you lied to me." "We did it to protect you, sweetheart," her mother cried, rushing to her. "We didn't want you to have that shadow hanging over you. We are your parents." "And what about when I met Liam?" Alice pressed the pieces, clicking together with sickening speed. "When I brought him home. An Ashford. Did you not once think to tell me?" Her parents' guilty silence was the only answer she needed. They had been afraid. Afraid of the power of the Ashford name. Afraid of losing the daughter they had raised. And their fear had almost led her into a life sentence of lies. The chaos of the church finally settled, as the last of the police cars, sirens now silent, pulled away. The guests began to filter out, ushered by the remaining officers. Their whispers, a low roar, an impostor. The whole family, a fraud. Did you see the blood all over her dress? Alice was left standing in the center of the cathedral, alone. The lilies now smelled like a funeral. Her dress, once a symbol of her dreams, was ruined, stained brown and crimson at the hem. Father Michael approached her, his face a mask of profound sorrow. "Alice, Sophia, he stammered. "I am so sorry. I should have acted faster. When Ms. Rossi first contacted me, I thought she was paranoid. I ran interference, told her I would look into it. I delayed. I tried to verify her claims without causing a scandal." "You were trying to protect the church," Alice said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a fact. He admitted, ashamed. I was trying to protect the Ashford donation for the new roof. I was being a politician, not a priest. And today, God forgive me, I was still planning to officiate. I was going to let you marry that man. I thought the DNA was a fake, a desperate plea. But when I saw her, when I saw him, his face when she said the word fire, I knew it was all true. He looked at the blood on the marble. You're Ms. Rosie, Isabella. She took a cab here, but her sister's letter said she was staying at a shelter on the west side. It's a 30-minute drive. But she showed up soaked. What are you saying? I'm saying, the priest said grimly, that the rainstorm she ran through wasn't rain. The fire department just called the police. Someone opened a fire hydrant on the street outside her shelter, and a black town car matching the description of the one Marcus Ashford uses was seen boxing her taxi in. They weren't just trying to stop her. They were trying to drown her. The image of the small, bruised woman fighting her way into the church took on a new, heroic light. She hadn't just been running. She had been surviving. She had fought her way through an assassination attempt to save a daughter she had never known. The hospital, Alice said, her voice hoarse. Which hospital? St. Jude's, across the street. Alice nodded. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say anything. She gathered the ripped, bloody skirts of her wedding gown in her fists, turned her back on the priest and the ruined wedding, and ran. She ran out of the cathedral past the gawking onlookers and the remaining news vans, a bride in a blood-stained dress, running not from her past, but directly toward it. The investigation into the Ashford family was swift and brutal. The media dubbed it the Imposter Prince. With Marcus Ashford and Jack Sullivan in custody, the carefully constructed fortress of their lives was torn apart brick by brick. Jack Sullivan, facing decades in prison for conspiracy and fraud, cooperated fully. His confession painted a horrifying portrait of his father, Marcus. The 25-year-old accident case of the fire that killed the real Liam Ashford was reopened. This time, investigators weren't looking at it as a tragedy. They were looking at it as a homicide and a cover-up. Marcus Ashford's arrogance melted away under interrogation. The pillar of the community was revealed as a sociopath, a man willing to kill his own sickly son and replace him with a proxy just to maintain control of his ancestral fortune. The trust, it turned out, was ironclad. Upon Marcus's death, if there was no direct male heir, the entire $5 billion Ashford estate would be dissolved and handed over to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Marcus, a man who prized money and lineage above all else, could not abide his legacy being wasted on old buildings. He had started the fire himself, a small, controlled blaze in the nursery. But the sickly Liam, weaker than he thought, had succumbed to the smoke. In a panic, Marcus had smothered his son with a pillow to ensure his silence, making it look like part of the fire's tragic toll. Nurse Catherine Rossi, who was on his private payroll to care for the child, was the one who found him. And Marcus had used her and her sister Isabella's precarious situation as leverage to force her silence and participation in the Jack Sullivan scheme. Jack's role was more complex. He was both a victim and a perpetrator. He had lived a life of gilded terror, a puppet dancing on Marcus's strings. But as Alice had pointedly noted, he was an adult now. He could have left. He could have told her the truth. His confession, however, revealed one final pathetic twist. "I couldn't leave," he told the detectives, his voice dead. He had a failsafe. He revealed that 2 years prior, when Jack had first tried to assert his independence by dating a woman Marcus didn't approve of, Marcus had set him up. He'd planted untraceable bonds in Jack's offshore account, and then discovered them, accusing Jack of embezzlement. He'd held the evidence over Jack's head. If Jack ever stepped out of line, Marcus wouldn't just expose him as an imposter, he would have him arrested as a thief. And Alice, she was a mistake, Jack whispered. I wasn't supposed to fall in love. I was supposed to marry Caroline Vane, the steel heiress. It was a merger. But I met Alice at that gallery, and she was real. She didn't care about the Ashford name. She just saw me. I thought if I married her, if I gave Marcus the one thing he couldn't control, I'd finally be free. By lying to her, the detective asked. By protecting her, Jack insisted. If she knew she'd be in his web. I thought once we were married we could just disappear. I had a plan. To take my own money, the money I'd hidden from him, and just run. With her. But he never got the chance. Because Isabella Rossi, armed with her sister's dying confession, had found her daughter. She had seen the wedding announcement in the paper and put the two pieces of her life together, her lost daughter Sophia and her sister's tormentor Ashford. The attack on her was as Father Michael suspected, a failed hit. Marcus, alerted by his PI that Isabella was planning to crash the wedding, had sent Evans and Davies to handle her. They'd staged the fire hydrant incident to get her taxi, intending to drag her into their car and make her disappear. But Isabella, fueled by a mother's desperation, had fought them off broken free and run the last 6 blocks to the church, arriving bruised, soaked, and just in time. The man Alice Hayes had loved, Liam Ashford, had never existed. He was a ghost, a role. And the man who played him, Jack Sullivan, was a tragedy of his own, making a man so broken by his past he couldn't see a future, and who had tried to build a foundation for his life on the most unstable ground of all, a lie. The cathedral, with its suffocating lilies and silent judging saints, dissolved behind her. The short run across the street to St. Jude's Hospital felt like crossing a chasm between 2 worlds. One a glittering, opulent lie, the other a world of harsh fluorescent lights, the sharp, clean smell of antiseptic, and a reality so brutal it stole her breath. A nurse, a kind, sturdy woman named Brenda, had found her shivering in the emergency room waiting area, a ghastly specter in a $5,000 wedding gown soaked in another's blood. "Honey, you look like you're in shock," the nurse had said, her voice a calm anchor in Alice's storm. She had gently guided Alice into a staff bathroom, helping her out of the ruined dress, a dress that was now a piece of police evidence, and given her a set of pale blue scrubs. They were stiff, scratchy, and smelled of industrial bleach. Alice had never been more grateful for anything in her life. She sat in the plastic visitor's chair outside room 304B for what felt like a lifetime. The blood was off her skin, but she could still see it, a dark, incriminating stain under her fingernails. She had scrubbed them until they were raw, but the crimson shadow remained. She was no longer a bride. She was no longer an almost Ashford. She wasn't even, she realized with a sickening lurch, Alice Hayes. The name felt like a costume she'd been wearing for so long she'd mistaken it for her own skin. She was Sophia Rossi. A name that meant nothing to her, and yet it was the key to everything. The doors to the waiting area swished open, and Alice looked up into the ravaged, tear-streaked faces of the only parents she had ever known. "Alice!" her mother Mary cried, rushing forward, her arms outstretched. "Oh, my baby, are you all right?" Alice flinched, a physical recoil so sharp it was like a slap. She stood, but she did not move toward them. The word baby felt like another lie, a grain of sand in the mountain of deceit she was now buried under. "Don't," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Don't call me that." "Sweetheart, please," her father. Alan pleaded, his face ashen. He looked 10 years older than he had at the altar. We wanted to tell you. So many times we wanted to." When Alice's voice was dangerously quiet, cold, with a grief that was rapidly hardening into rage. "When did you want to tell me? When I was 10, when I graduated? Or did you just decide it was a need-to-know secret, and I never needed to know?" "We were trying to protect you," Mary sobbed, clutching her husband's arm. "The agency. They told us your mother. They said she was unstable, that she'd abandoned you. It was a closed adoption. We were supposed to be your clean slate, your new beginning." "My clean slate." Alice repeated the words, tasting like ash. "So you gave me one. And then when I brought home a man named Ashford, a name Father Michael said was tied to your sister's, my aunt's, breakdown, you didn't think to mention it? You didn't see the name and think, maybe our daughter should know the truth before she marries into the one family on earth that destroyed her biological one?" Her parents' guilty, horrified silence was the only answer. They hadn't known the whole story. Not the imposter part, not the fire. But they had known enough. They had known the name Rossi and the name Ashford were enemies. And they had stayed silent, terrified that the beautiful life they had built for their daughter and the beautiful life their daughter was building for them would be shattered. "Were you just happy?" Alice asked the question, tearing out of her. "Happy I was marrying a billionaire was my real past, just an inconvenience to the dream. No, Alice, no, we love you." Alan insisted, tears streaming down his face. "It was never about the money. We were just scared. Scared of losing you. Scared of her." He gestured toward the door of room 304B. Alice's gaze followed his hand. That one small gesture solidified everything. Her. The unstable woman. The shadow. The woman who today had fought her way through a violent assault to save the daughter they had hidden from her. "She's not her," Alice said, her voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "She's my mother. And she's in that room with a head injury because she did the one thing you were too afraid to do. She told me the truth." She turned her back on them. I can't. I can't look at you right now. Go. Go to the cafeteria. Go home. I can't." She didn't wait to hear their heartbroken protests. She pushed open the door to room 304B and stepped inside, letting it click shut behind her, sealing her off from the life she had known. The room was dim, the only light coming from the city glow outside the window and the faint green pulse of the heart monitor. Beep, 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 a steady, reassuring rhythm. In the bed, Isabella Rossi was still. Her head was wrapped in a turban of white bandages. A web of purple and black bruises was beginning to bloom along her jaw and cheekbone. An IV line snaked into the back of her hand, a hand that was calloused and scarred. This was not the hand of an Ashford. It was the hand of a woman who had fought for everything. Alice sat in the plastic chair, her body thrumming with an exhausted, terrified energy. She was alone with a stranger who was her blood. She watched her breathe. She thought about Jack, the man she had loved. Had any of it been real? The gallery meeting, the late-night talks, the way he'd kissed her forehead, she had to believe his love for her was, that she was his one rebellion, his one attempt at a real life. But it was a poisoned love, grown in a garden of lies. And like a poisoned plant, it had to be ripped out roots, and all before it killed her. As dawn began to break, painting the industrial skyline in shades of gray and a surprisingly soft lavender, the woman in the bed stirred. Her eyes, the hazel eyes Alice saw in her own mirror, fluttered. They were hazy, unfocused. They roamed the room before landing on Alice. A flicker of panic. "Sophia." The name, whispered in a raw rasp, hit Alice like a lightning strike. It was the lullaby. It was the church. It was her. Alice surged forward, grabbing the woman's hand. It was warm. "I'm here." Isabella's eyes focused, the panic sharpening. "The wedding. The man. They're gone," Alice said, her voice thick. "They're arrested. Marcus and Jack. The man I was going to marry. It's over. You did it. You saved me." The tension left Isabella's body in a long, shuddering sigh. Her first words, her first coherent thought, hadn't been for herself. They had been for her. "You're safe," Isabella whispered, and this time it was a statement, a prayer answered. "I'm safe." Alice confirmed the tears that she had been holding back, finally breaking free. I'm Alice." Isabella smiled, a painful wince that tugged at her stitches. "Alice, it's a beautiful name. They gave you a good name." "They're good people," Alice said the words, surprising her. But she knew they were true. Flawed, terrified human, but good. I'm so confused." "They raised you. They kept you safe when I couldn't," Isabella said, her voice clear of bitterness. "That is good." She paused, her eyes tracing Alice's features as if memorizing them. "I saw your engagement. In the paper. I cut it out." She gestured weakly to the pile of her ruined, muddy clothes, which a nurse had bagged and left on a chair. "It's in my pocket. Your face. I knew it was you. You have my eyes. But your smile, that is your padre, your father." Alice's world, which she thought had no more capacity to tilt, spun again. "My father, Angelo, he was a painter," Isabella said, her eyes looking past Alice into a memory. "So much passion. He died before you were born. A fever fast and cruel. He never even knew I was pregnant. I was alone. I had nothing." The unstable woman. The abandonment. It wasn't a failure. It was a tragedy. A young grieving widow, penniless, who had her child taken away. "You called me Sophia," Alice whispered, desperate to connect the pieces. "In the church. And I remember a song. Lavender. Something about dreaming." Isabella's face battered as it was transformed. A light ignited behind her eyes that no beating could extinguish. "Ah, yes," she breathed. Tears welled. She began to hum a broken, fragile tune. And then she whispered the words. "Dream, my Sophia, dream." Alice's breath hitched. She knew it. "The moon is your pillow," Isabella whispered. "Dream, my little one." Alice finished the memory, flooding her not as a wisp, but as a visceral, profound certainty. It was the only real thing she had from the time before. She laid her head on the edge of the hospital bed, her scrubs bunching up, and she wept. She wept for the father she never knew, for the impostor she had loved, for the parents who had lied, and for the 28 years this woman had spent searching for her. I'm so sorry, my dear. Isabella whispered, her calloused hand finding Alice's hair, stroking it. I'm so sorry. They took you. I was so sick, so lost. I tried to find you. For 28 years I've been a ghost, just searching. I was never strong enough to keep you. Alice lifted her head, her face a mask of tears, but her eyes were suddenly fiercely clear. The feeling of being an imposter, the lifelong sense of not belonging, it was gone. Evaporated. Not strong enough, Alice said, her voice shaking with a new, powerful emotion. A ghost. You fought 2 trained bodyguards. You ran 6 blocks after they tried to kill you. You threw yourself in front of a billionaire's wedding, in front of a monster to save a daughter you hadn't seen in 28 years. Strong isn't the word, Isabella. Alice took a deep, ragged breath. You're not a ghost. You're my mother. And you're the most terrifying, incredible person I have ever met. A messy, complicated sob broke from Isabella's chest. Alice leaned in, pressing her forehead to her mother's. She wasn't Alice Hayes, the imposter. She wasn't just Sophia Rossi, the lost daughter. She was both. She was the child of Alan and Mary Hayes, who had loved her with a quiet, protective, and flawed human heart. And she was the child of Isabella and Angelo Rossi, who had loved her with a fiery, primal, unconquerable power. The wedding was a disaster. Her past was a ruin. But as she sat in that sterile room holding her mother's hand, Alice Hayes, Sophia Rossi, finally felt completely and utterly real. In the end, it wasn't a fairy tale. It was a nightmare. But Alice the bride in the bloody dress walked out of that nightmare and into the truth. The Ashford Empire crumbled, built as it was on the bones of a dead child and the life of a stolen one. Marcus Ashford was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his son. Jack Sullivan, the imposter groom, received 15 years for his role in the fraud, his love story becoming a cautionary tale. But what about Alice and her mother, Isabella? Their story is the one that truly matters. It wasn't about the money or the lies. It was about a bond that even a 28-year separation couldn't break. Theirs is a story of healing, of learning, and of building a new life from the ashes of a wedding day disaster. What would you have done if you were Alice? Could you ever forgive the man who lied to you, or the parents who kept your past a secret? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. These real-life dramas are more twisted than any movie. If you want to hear more stories about secrets, lies, and the search for the truth, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a good story, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an update.